Pardon the interruption, but I'm Mike Wilbon. Tony, we're just 3.5 hours away from the tip-off of the NBA Finals.
I'm Tony Kornheiser, so that makes me 3 hours and 45 minutes away from sleepy time.
To be honest, the great Hubie Brown, asked me if you were going to make the tip-off at 9:07.
I'll make the tip-off.
I told him,
I was the tip-off.
That's the over-under. I was taking the under. Hubie tried to defend you, and I couldn't go there.
I'll make the tip-off. I'll probably go a full half, but I'm
all right.
I'm doubtful for the second half.
I'll tell Hubie he was right, I was wrong. I promise.
Welcome to PTI, boys and girls. In today's episode, the Predators lose Game 2, the Cubs lose 6 straight, and Mr. Met loses his job. But we begin today, finally, with Game 1 of the NBA Finals. If it seems like they haven't played in weeks, it's because they haven't played in weeks. Wilbon, you are there in the Bay Area. You think, as we all think, that these are the two best teams in basketball. This is the rubber match of their 3 straight finals. Who do you think is going to win and why?
I have no idea who is going to win. I have no idea who is going to win because every time I sit down and try to talk this out, either just in my own head or with people who make a living, either having played or coached in the NBA, people like Hubie Brown or my dear friend John Barry, who I had dinner with last night. You talk about this stuff endlessly, and I can't come to any conclusion. Here's what I know, or here's what I feel. I feel that the Golden State Warriors are ever so slightly a better team, though not deeper. But the top is, I think, slightly better. But the other team has LeBron James. And this is not pro football, it's not baseball, it's not hockey, where a goaltender is disproportionately important. The best player in the NBA wins much of the time, and LeBron James is that guy. So I am conflicted. If you make me make a pick,
yes, I'm
going to say home court advantage will result in Golden State in triple overtime in Game 7. But I know I don't know who is going to win this series. I don't. It's too close.
I understand it's a close call. It's interesting that you would talk about a Game 7. I look at Game 7, the possibility of a Game 7 as well, and I think that for the second year in a row, Golden State will not lose at home in Game 7. Not 2 years in a row, even to the greatest player in basketball, which LeBron is. I think that if all things are equal and people aren't hurt and Draymond Green doesn't get kicked out of a game, which cost the Warriors last year, then I think Golden State is slightly better because of all the shooting they have. I think tonight's game may be the worst of the games because they've been off for so long. This may be the 95-91 game that we're not going to see down the road. But I would say this to you, Mike. Whoever wins this game, this series, is going to be ranked as one of the greatest teams of all time because the star power across the board in this series, especially with Kevin Durant in it now. Yeah. The last time we saw this was Birds Celtics and Magic's Lakers, and those are considered two of the greatest teams of all time.
Tony, I agree with all of that. I will say this about tonight. The Warriors, after a long layoff because of the timing, it's just exquisite when they're on. They're not going to have that in the first half.
No, they won't.
And I wonder about the first half where the Cleveland's going to race off to a Spurs-like Game 1 lead. And then that could change the dynamic.
I think it's possible.
No, I did. That's the greatness of this, I think.
Just when LeBron James probably felt he could devote all his time to preparing for Game 1 of the NBA Finals, his yesterday was taken up with talking about an incident of racial graffiti on the gate of his L.A. home. LeBron spoke at length about this, saying in part, quote, just shows that racism will always be a part of the world, part of America. Hate in America, especially for African Americans, is living every day. No matter how much money you have, how famous you are, how much people admire you, being black in America is tough, unquote. Mike, your thoughts?
A lot of thoughts, Tony. First of all, I'm proud to know LeBron James. That LeBron James, now he understands the platform. He understands the weight he is under, no matter how famous he is. Arthur Ashe once famously said something that went like this, that being a black man in America is like having an additional full-time job. And see, Tony, this is not new, but it is renewed. And since the most recent November presidential election, black people overwhelmingly have felt as if it is now okay for people to feel emboldened to do the kinds of thing that happened to LeBron James's property. That there's a new attack, if you will. And that is the way we feel overwhelmingly. That if at the top of the triangle, if you will, in this country, in government and politics, if it starts there, People think it's okay. And LeBron is feeling the sting of this like generations of people going back hundreds of years who look like us. And I am glad that he said, now when I see him tonight, I don't care about basketball. I'm going to tell him, thank you for saying what you said, having the courage to do it.
I obviously can't speak personally to the issues that you're talking about. But I will say that I have seen him do this a few times now. I saw him do it with Trayvon Martin, and I saw him do this yesterday, and I watched almost everything that he said. And every time LeBron gets out there on social issues, he seems to me, and I want to get the wording right because I wrote it down, it's reasonable, it's sobering, and it's persuasive. Now, I know that Michael Jordan did not deal with social and political issues a lot. And by the way, that was his right. You don't have to do it. I don't have to do it. Michael Jordan doesn't have to do it. LeBron chooses to do it. When he does it, he brings me to his side. And I remember this, Michael. We talked about this a lot. This is a guy who was famous since he was 13 or 14 years old. And everybody knew he'd be a great pro basketball player. And his formal education stopped at high school. So people said, he's just going to be a jock. And then he said, I'm going to become friends with Warren Buffett. And everybody laughed at him. But he became friends with Warren Buffett. And he produces movies. And he produces television shows. And he acts every once in a while. And every time he is called on to be a serious person, he is a serious person.
He is, Tony, with gravity and responsibility. Yes. And he's unafraid. It doesn't mean others aren't unafraid. It means LeBron, who the spotlight shines the brightest on.
Yes, it does.
Right? It doesn't shine as brightly on anybody in the NFL or anybody in any other sport in American culture. It shines on him. Yeah. And he has delivered time after time. And the message, Tony, the message is so important. And again, we talk about this stuff all the time among ourselves. LeBron has not been afraid to take it to a national level, and I think a lot of us are grateful. Tony, let's get back to more mundane issues in sports, like my absurd notion that Nashville was going to win in Pittsburgh last night. The Penguins scored 3 third-period goals and once again punked the Predators' key player, goaltender Pekka Rinne, who is now winless in 9 starts against the Penguins in his career. The Predators coach Peter Laviolette was non-committal about who is going to be in net Saturday when the series swings to Nashville. Tone, if you're coaching the Preds, what do you do about the Rinne situation?
Let me say, first of all, that I believe I had this. Okay, yesterday, I told you that the Predators had about a 40% chance of the bounce-back game after you crazily went to 100%.
I did. Boom, I was 100%. Nuts.
All right, so now you've mentioned that Rinne has never won. He's not won a game. He's started against Pittsburgh.
Once in relief. That's all he's got.
I believe I have the statistic correct. In the last 4 games against Pittsburgh, he has allowed 4 goals in each of those games. This is the case against him. The case against him is he can't win. He can't beat this team. Okay? But he's the best goalie they've got. He's been their #1 goalie for 9 years. This is a home game. Mike, I would start him in the home game. I think I owe him that much to start him in the home game. If you lose, you lose. You're the number 16 seed against the number 2 seed. I think you owe him that. What do you think?
Tony, I think I believe that, but here's the bigger problem to me. Forget Pittsburgh. In each round of the playoffs, Rinne has gotten worse.
That's right. That's right.
And so basically he could just be tired. It's a long season. So what you have to assess if you're Peter Laviolette is, can my backup give me anything that will just sort of give us a little bounce?
What's the backup's name? Nobody's heard of the backup.
Tony, Laviolette has got to figure out not whether this guy's a star, but whether he can give him one good performance in the playoffs going forward against Pittsburgh Saturday.
You'd yank Rinne. You'd yank.
I think I would.
Okay, I would not. What about your Cubs? Whew, they have dropped from the penthouse to the outhouse. Last night they were beaten again and swept by the AAA San Diego Padres. They've now lost 6 games in a row. They are now 2 games under 500. They don't look anything like the 27 Yankees anymore. Should team president Theo Epstein, who you love, stand by the team he has or start to make some changes?
Well, Tony, it's not just a matter of making changes. They made changes to come into the season. The Cubs didn't stand pat. Theo didn't stand pat. They let Dexter Fowler go. They got the new hot shot in center field. They put Schwarber up at leadoff, and he's, hitting about $150.
Because he moved out of your building.
So change. It's not about changes. The Cubs didn't come in and say, we got these 9 guys in this rotation. No.
Right.
The starting rotation has been bad. Arrieta looks like a guy they're just going to let walk into free agency. The bullpen has been at times awful except for Wade Davis. So this is not about changes.
Right.
This is about being better at what you do. And the Cubs and Joe Madden had to find out what buttons to push to motivate the same players who were great 8 months ago.
So you don't want to make a bunch of trades. You don't want to bring in a bunch of new people, right? That's your position?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right. Here's my position, and it comes from Tim Kirchin, because I had him on the podcast the other day, and Tim said, look, it's a terrible division. They're going to skate into the playoffs no matter what. And he also said, it's June 1. It's just too early to look at something like this. And my position is a little bit different. I tell you this all the time. They won the World Series for the first time in 108 years. Lighten up on this team. You know, give them a chance to get back into their own sense of rhythm without wholesale changes. I mean, Schwarber was bad at leadoff, and we understand that. We didn't think that was going to happen. But they got more talent than the other teams in the division.
Yeah.
Like, they do.
Yeah, Tony, they had that. They've had the cold weather excuse. There's a lot of stuff out there,
Yeah.
and they're 2 games under 500, and they hadn't been that under Madden. But they don't look like last year's
They're
Cubs or
2.5
the 2015 either.
They can smell first place. They're only 2.5 back.
They can. That's right, Tony. That's true. A little patience. Against my better judgment, we will now move to a mascot story. During last night's Mets loss to the Brewers, Mr. Met was caught on video flipping the bird at a fan. Once they were aware of this, the Mets issued an apology and fired the employee who was in the dopey costume.
Yeah.
Tony, you know my sensibilities when it comes to mascots, but this is about the team of your childhood, and you love mascot chatter.
Yeah,
so I want you to take your time. And by taking your time, big boy, I mean the entire time left in this segment, and tell America whether Mr. Met deserves to be fired.
First of all, people have to understand how this works. There's not just one Mr. Met. There's 5 or 6 Mr. Mets. There's young men, young women. I don't know who's in Mr. Met, but every day it sort of changes. It's a rotating cast. So it is very possible that the Mets have said they fired this particular miscreant, but he or she will be back in 3 days being Mr. Met again. Because you know why? Because they don't talk. Nobody knows who any of them are, and this is the way it works in baseball. The other thing is, if you look very carefully at Mr. Met's hand, he only has 4 fingers. So there is no middle finger. Okay, it's very possible Mr. Met used the index finger to symbolize something else, that we're number one, even though we don't let our manager talk about injuries, even though we don't make our star players take MRIs, even though we allow some pitchers to show up or not show up. I can conclude the rest of my segment by saying, meet the Mets, step right up and greet the Mets, bring your kiddies, bring your wife, guaranteed to have the time of your life.
Are you spent now? By the way, who in New York, how many people do you think haven't flipped somebody off publicly in their lives? Give me a percentage.
Than 1. Less than 1. Let's take a break. Coming up, we will ask Brian Windhorst what specific aspect of the Warriors stresses out LeBron.
We'll also ask him how Mike Brown feels about coaching against his former team, those Cavaliers.
Because the Mets are really socking the ball, knocking the home runs over the wall. East side, west side, everybody's coming down to see the METS.
Pardon the interruption is presented by Captain Morgan. Live like a captain. Please drink responsibly. Part of Happy Hour.
Captain.
Pardon the interruption. Presented by Captain Morgan. Part of Happy Hour.
A year-long PTI investigation has revealed that the NBA Finals begin tonight in Oakland, which is where we find our friend Brian Windhorst. Brian, let's begin with this. LeBron said the other day that thinking about the Warriors stresses him out. Question 1 is, does he seem stressed out to you? And question 2 is, what aspect about facing the Warriors does he seem particularly concerned about?
Well, I think when you look at the way the Warriors play, especially if you watched them in the playoffs, which LeBron watched every second, it can be a little bit disconcerting, especially in this building. Now, people have made fun of me when I've talked about this, but look at all the yellow behind me. When you come into this building, it's like screaming at you, screaming yellow at you, and you got Steph Curry hitting threes, Kevin Durant hitting threes, Klay Thompson hitting threes. The crowd's on top of you here. This is the smallest footprint arena in the league now. It's not like any other arena. It's right on top of you. It's very disconcerting. I went back and watched the finals last year over this little break here, and the difference in the way the Cavs handled themselves in this building in Game 1 and the way they handled themselves in this building in Game 7 was night and day, because it takes you a while to get used to what you feel on this court. And it stresses me out just seeing the Warriors play. I can only imagine being out here when the lights are actually on.
All right, let's get to one of the non-stars in this series, JaVale McGee, who's been a beast at times in his short stints of play for Golden State. But one unnamed Cavaliers player apparently doesn't think that McGee is smart enough to stay on the floor long in this series. Seems like an old criticism to me dating back to the Washington days. But what, given what you've seen from JaVale McGee, do you expect out of him in this series?
Well, I don't know if JaVale McGee is going to be on the court in the fourth quarter of close games in this series, but what I will say is this. If you watch the Cavs over the first 3 rounds, they basically attacked the strong side, and the ball, when it would go to the weak side, they would give up open shots. And they were willing to live with the open shots of the role players of the Toronto Raptors and the Boston Celtics. They genuinely did pretty well there. If you allow the Warriors to make 3 passes and it ends in JaVale McGee's hands, he will dunk on you. That wasn't happening. They weren't getting penalized for that in the last round. Really, that's the big difference between playing in the East playoffs and playing in this series here. You got to worry about all 5 players on the court. And I don't know if JaVale McGee is going to get 10 minutes or 15 minutes or 18 minutes or whatever it's going to be, but if you don't pay attention to him, he will embarrass you. You could say that about all the Warriors players.
I talked to someone at length yesterday who you covered at length, Mike Brown, who has had a very different season than in any time of his life now coaching these Warriors. One, I want to ask you, how you expect Mike Brown to deal in a situation very different than the one he was in Cleveland. And by the way, he won't say a critical word about the Cavaliers, will he?
That's right. Now, let me just say something about Mike Brown. I know the man very well. Okay, I covered him for 5 years. I've been close to him and close to his family. And so I speak from this with knowledge. He wants to kill the Cavs. He wants to kill them. He feels like he got a really unfair shake. He got a really unfair shake his second time there. They thought they had put the plan in place to get this type of team. They thought they were going to get LeBron back. They really did. Him and Chris Grant, the general manager, had a plan in place. They had all these draft picks. They were ready to make trades, and it just got derailed. And one of the reasons it got derailed is because because Kyrie Irving and Mike Brown hated each other. They couldn't stand each other. Kyrie was willing even to say yesterday he regretted how that went. But Kyrie was kind of like, it's me or him. And it turned out to be Mike Brown because the player always wins, and Kyrie signed his contract extension. Now, Mike is a classy guy, and Mike is not going to criticize the Cavs, but he has another reason why he's not criticizing him. He's getting the balance of his $23 million contract that he signed, and he's getting paid through 2020. So while he's getting those checks, he is not going to say a cross word about Dan Gilbert or the Cleveland Cavaliers franchise. But come on, put yourself in his shoes.
Just a fabulous answer. I love that answer. We will get you out of here on this. Wilbon and I have already talked about it on this show. How do you see this series playing out? Who wins it?
Well, as you guys know, my brand is that I perform in front of dance teams on this show. That's what I do. And I also don't make predictions. I know enough to know that I don't know. The Warriors, I believe, are the better team. But the Warriors were the better team last year, and the better player won. Scenario is the same. If you're going to get a poker hand, you're going to see how the cards play out. The Cavs like their hand. We'll see how it goes.
Thanks, Brian. Please don't dance for us.
See you in a minute.
Let's take one last break. Still to come, a farewell from the French Open does not sit well with your boy, Nick Kyrgios.
Yeah, what does? And Tony's boy, Phil Jackson, might be cooking up something with the Knicks in the NBA draft.
We spoke today, Phil and I.
Whoa, that's like old times.
First time in a while, yes.
Did you guys do those weird 70s things you used to do together, too?
No, we didn't. Phil was somewhat critical of my positions lately.
It's a nail-biter here in Indy.
No OT tonight.
Hurry in for the first ever Yeti sale. Save 25%.
Freeman, most recently seen in the remake of Going in Style, where Freeman was the youngest of the big stars. Alan Arkin is 83, Michael Caine is 84. All of them are Oscar winners, and it's great that they're still working. Wilbon, favorite Morgan Freeman movie?
I love a lot of his movies, like Shawshank Redemption, but I'm going to go with polar opposites for the top 2. Glory and Driving Miss Daisy. Can you get more opposite than that?
It would be hard, in truth. Happy anniversary, Johan Santana. On this day 5 years ago, you threw the first no-hitter in the Mets' 51-year history. It was a great feat, but bittersweet. Santana threw a career-high 134 pitches in only his 11th start since shoulder surgery, and he never really recovered.
I guess that was too soon after shoulder surgery, but Tone, we covered baseball at a time where 134 pitches was nightly. That was routine, right?
It was, indeed. Happy trails, Nick Kyrgios. The excitable 18th-seeded Australian went out in the second round of the French Open today. And watch him during the match, smashing his racket in a fit of childishness. For local Washington, D.C. fans, Kyrgios has signed with the World Team Tennis Castles to play one match. And I would pay to see this dope. I would.
I know you're not going to have to pay to see him, and when people say, "Oh, this is like John McEnroe," no, it wasn't.
No.
This guy's not anywhere on the same planet when it comes to talent and showmanship as John McEnroe. So don't go there.
One clarification: the producers looked it up, and they report that the Predators' backup goalie is UC Soros. Let's go to the big finish.
Let's do it.
Kevin Durant could reportedly take less money to keep the Warriors' core intact. Your thoughts?
Well, he would. To keep Livingston and Iguodala and part of that, wonderful team together, he would have to do that. So good. The Knicks are reportedly trying to land one of Portland's 3 first-round picks. What is your boy, your dear friend Phil, up to?
Go, Phil. Turn the team around. Time to do this. White Sox broadcaster Hawk Harrelson says he will retire after next season. You've heard him for a long time. How do you feel about that?
He gone. You can put it on the board. Yes. No, I don't want Hawk Harrelson to go. I love listening to him. Dustin Johnson shot his worst round in 15 months at the Memorial. 6 over 78. Is that a big deal?
If I shot 78, I'd buy everybody drinks. There is zero chance I could do that. He had one bad round. Stop. He hits the ball 400 yards. Last one, Red Sox at Orioles tonight. Do you expect another contentious series?
I don't know. It seems the Orioles are over this. The Red Sox, I got to see proof of it before I go naive and say it's done.
Out of time. Try and do better the next time. I'm Tony Kornheiser.
I'm Mike Wilbon. Same time tomorrow, Knuckleheads. You can get the PTI podcast on the app or Apple Podcasts.
Michael Kornheiser, Billy Peel, Ralph Blasi, Alex Tenov, Low Gross. Shout out.